So we're here in London, checking out something kind of cool. Unassuming little side street, quarter mile from Big Ben. We've got a big old wooden gate here. And what's behind it? Well, as far as I can tell, a little bit of magic. See, they take antique cars and turn them into electric cars. They got Austin Healey's, they've got Minis, they've got a Mercedes and a Bentley. They got all kinds of cool stuff. So let's check it out. I'm Brian. Welcome to my Tesla Weekend.
Zero. Not the front. So this is a Bentley T2. It's basically the same as Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. Really iconic. I these they series all over the world. It's a particularly complicated car to convert. Right side. It's a complex car. So you've got a hydraulic system, which is really unusual in cars. So which does the brakes, it does the self-leveling suspension, and you also have power steering, and then the car itself, just by the nature of the engineering picture, it's very, very heavy. So the wing to raise the most modern cars on dual braking system by having a spoon too. This has a dual braking system by having a tube braking system. And you can just see from the metal work in the interior that everything was very heavy. It's all chunky steel. And as I end up to something like the Titanic or the big steel ocean liners, I said, yeah, that's our design computer. This is unfortunately, and this is on the point we get the Tesla cars, we're right in the middle of doing some final testing. This has the 110 kilowatt motor in it, so we were looking at, turning up the power a bit on it, upgraded from the 80 kilowatt. And the power steering rack seals fail, and it's impossible to turn the steering at the moment. And that's a lot of the challenges we see with convertible cars. We're putting all new or repurposed or listing the component onto the car, but plenty of the components, the original components, are still 50, 60, 70 years old.
Wow.
And so they're vulnerable to go at times. So in some cases, you'll see we've got cars here which have been fully restored before we convert them. Others, as I said, we're really interested in saying to people, okay, bring us your car, we'll convert it, give it back to you.
Because this is clearly a well-loved car.
Yes. So this guy, he's owned his car, I think, for 30 years. You'll see he's got his initial and his wife's initial and the receipts.
Oh, sure. Oh, funny.
Yeah, it's got the most wonderful interior of these things, and they just smell of sort of luxury.
Wow.
It's wonderful to be in. It's just modern cars just all like this, sort of just a real copious amount of fine material, comfort, and the seats are all squidgy. And there's lots of nice walnut and stuff like that. But yeah, he's owned it for a long time. He was very well. I think they do about 10 miles to the gallon as petrol cars.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And he was like, I don't, and this is what we see with a lot of people, is people with blunt realize they don't drive long distances most of the time in their cars. And so it was interesting in getting this to the Tesla to sort of run around. It's had a rapid charger put into this. So he'll be able to go out on long ranges if he needs to. But in reality, with most people, 90% of our journeys are under 10 miles, and so this would easily get up to do, the days worth of driving, bring it out and charge it off overnight, and leave the next day.
Now, most of the cars you do, are they able to fast charge, or are most of them set to charge at home?
Totally depends on what the owner looks for. So fast charger alone, the rapid charger is a sort of added cost. For sure. We're still in the final stages of working at CCS. We fit CHAdeMO to FIFRAs now. CHAdeMO is slightly simpler, just because communication protocols of it. So you'll see some Austin Healey's there we get with CHAdeMO. We've done a couple VWs in CHAdeMO. So yeah, it depends. Depends on the car. Also, it depends on voltage the car runs out. The rapid charging tends not to really be able to go much below 250, 300 volts. So if the cars aren't set up, so if you've got the series one behind you, that runs at 100 volts. This was very much in its early days of sort of being
So how do you manage the hydraulic systems or other because an electric car doesn't necessarily have the same kind of pumps and everything.
So we replace them. It depends if, each depends basically. So on the Bentley, where you've got a real true hydraulic system, it's running at something like 1500 psi. That would previously be done by belchers and hydraulic. Sure, we replaced the hydraulic up to the electric hydraulic column.
And that does the trick.
Yeah. And it took a bit of working. We said what could fill this too powerful when it was on, we were finding it was doing that. There was a power surge to it. Was that drawing power away from other stuff, which you then have to manage. So it's not always completely straightforward because there are ways and means of doing it. Vacuum is a common also thing that you naturally get flushed in from cars. So we have little electronic vacuum pumps, or you can replace the entire vacuum braking system with an electronic braking system.
So where do the batteries end up? Where do they go?
So it depends on the car.
So you do, on the site, you've got a lot of Minis and like Land Rovers. So where do you put them in those?
So the Minis, they go in the back. You can see on that Mini.
Because that's got to be your most space-constrained form factor.
Absolutely. In the tow box. So this car, you can see there's a battery pack here. So this has a whole assembly pack in it. You've got half the pack at the front. You've got a quarter of the pack under drive, the seat, which is where the original fuel tank would have been.
Oh, well.
And then another quarter or half batch packet under the rear tub, with still where the muffler would have been.
Okay.
And with conversions that we do in the UK, we were under quite strict rules that we're allowed to modify the chassis or the monocoque. Okay. And we're allowed to radically modify the vehicle, and there's quite set terms that describe whether or not the vehicle has been radically modified. So a car like this, we're looking from existing melting points to dissolve what the fuel tank was like for the battery wires. Sometimes it doesn't fit, like the Series 1 behind you. The space where the fuel tank used to be doesn't quite fit the battery pack that we want to put in. So we have to get a little bit further. But you could generally find voids in the chassis as well. And the Mini and completely to the battery pack of the boot. For this is some fill hours of the family cell. And you see there's a frame that's getting ready to take it in the boot. This is again a classic problem you find. We fit the frame, so we take out the petrol tank, we discover there's a rust hole on the petrol tank.
Right.
So we a bit of a stall while you go ahead and repair that. That comes with the territory a bit. And we're finding new kinds of people interested in this who maybe wouldn't have considered passive cars previously. And they're going out looking for a deal to buy your passive car. You then convert it and you realise that it's just an absolute rust bucket.
Yeah.
And so we then have to go back to the customer and say there's some new right and it gets restored somewhere else, or we can look to do that. Obviously we're quite expensive when it comes to restoration.
Right.
It's not something we particularly want to be doing.
Yes. And everyone's expensive for it.
Yeah. We've had two cars actually coming from Ireland where they've been sent there to be stored and then sent to us. And then you'll find various cars. The Austin Healy's will come from the States. For the Lincoln Continental has come from the States. It also depends, we're car enthusiasts at the end of the day. So with the Lincoln Continental, for example, that was really difficult to say no to because it's just such an incredible project. Right. But it comes with a lot of restoration. But we're, in that instance, happy to take it on because the finished product.
So that's one of my questions. What are the coolest and weirdest cars you've done?
There's quite a few. So we've done a thing called a Bond Bug. Don't know if you've ever come across that. It's a little orange three-wheeler made in the 70s, all fiberglass. That's quite experienced. Obviously, for me, the Minis are super cool.
Right.
They make such great conversions. They're just so much fun. And with all that talk, all of a sudden, so you can burn rubber at will. The Austin Healys are pretty special.
They are pretty special.
They're just absolute gorgeous cars. And the way we're doing them, we're fully restoring them. We're actually sort of tech supplier for a company called Revival, just to Austin Healys. And they fully restore them, and then they convert it. They're generally putting a lot of power into them as well. So they're just a lot of fun. We've got a Lincoln Continental, one of the 12 Archers. And then we have some more modern stuff that sort of the early idea for the business was to figure out how do we do affordable conversions, because that's the real challenge. This is at the moment more of a niche industry. Volumes are quite small, prices are high, production throughput's quite limited. So it's where the money's at, and at the moment we need the money to be able to do the R&D. But what got me interested in this whole space was looking at the broader picture of the amount of combustion engine vehicles in the world, the obvious understanding that we're going electric, and how do you manage that transition without scrapping 2 billion vehicles? And that's what we're looking at. And so that's what got me into conversion.
And a cost factor that you're running up against is that even in a single model, they're different.
Yes. In a single model, there's differences. Also, just understanding the business. This is so new, and just finding the business models for this idea of First of all, in the early years, so I started in 2016, 2017, so the end of 2016, and in the early days, it was, is this a thing? Can you do this? Is there interest? Are people, going to buy these kind of things? In the early years, even, is it a thing? Can you do it? And to be honest, early on, looking at some of the old commercials done in the 80s and 90s, they were really unappealing in many ways. Sure, as you needed to be like a complete electrical engineer to understand what was going on. They were eccentric.
And 500 to 1,000 pounds of lead acid.
Absolutely. A stack of DC motors that would spark when the brushes ran out. But also you were finding people doing, because they were put together by, I suppose, enthusiasts and their own vehicles, they were quite often doing eccentric things that would be appropriate, acceptable to them, but to someone who's not familiar with the technology would come up and be very unapproachable. You'd open up the bonnet and just these spaghettis of wires everywhere.
Sure.
So part of what I did in my first trial was I tried to make it really approachable, very simple looking, but also things like keeping the gearbox, keeping the clutch, so that when you sat in the car, it still felt like the original Morris might, and you couldn't tell until you turned the key on. Even basically was like starting the car by turning the key on. You can go to the ignition, you go to start, the car starts. Rather than, you see a lot of conversions where you turn the ignition on, there's switches, there's other buttons. All very alienating.
Sure. And perfectly acceptable if you built it.
Yeah.
You know the quirks.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody in the mainstream is going to have that.
Exactly.
That's just too much.
Yeah.
So there it is, and there you go. Yeah, it got a little long in the edit, so part 2 of this is going to be posted in a few days, maybe a week or two. Who knows? Great stuff. So awesome. LondonElectricCars.com. Check them out. I don't know. Mad thanks to my patrons who get early access, bonus content, all that good stuff. Who knows? Whatever. For the rest of you, subscribe, like, leave an angry comment. As bitter as you'd like. Get mega in the city or suburbs or wilderness. That's a joke directed at one person. So yeah, let me know what I missed. Let me know what I misunderstood. Stay tuned, stay juicy, and I can't wait to hear from you clever robots on the next installment of this series.